MH370, operated by Malaysia Airlines, was a Boeing B777 aircraft that took off from Kuala Lumpur International Airport on March 8, 2014 at 42 minutes after midnight local time. Beijing, China was its final stop. There were 227 passengers and 12 Malaysian crew members on board. The passengers include 152 Chinese nationals, along with 50 passengers from Malaysia, as well as travellers from the US, Australia, Canada, France, Hong Kong, India, Indonesia, Iran, the Netherlands, and New Zealand. It's a typical plane but an important one, as it connects Kuala Lumpur to Beijing, which is an essential route for Malaysian Airlines. 53-year-old Zahari Ahmad Shah was the pilot of the aircraft. He was married and had 3 children. With 33 years of experience flying for Malaysia Airlines, Captain Shah accumulated 18,423 hours of flight time. He had 8,659 hours in the B777 and 16 years experience as a captain. He had been appointed as a type rating instructor and type rating examiner on the B777 due to his solid track record and seniority. He was acknowledged as a skilled and well-respected pilot with no mistakes on his record. Serving as the co-pilot was 27-year-old Farik Abdul Hamid. He was unmarried. Co-pilot Hamid had 2,813 hours of flight time and had been a pilot for Malaysia Airlines for 7 years. He had just finished the mandatory training required to make the transition to the B777 and was in the process of doing so. Aboard the B777, he spent 39 hours. His next scheduled flight was to be his check ride, which would follow his final training flight on MH370. It is standard procedure in airline operations to go through this type check training. As a designated type rating instructor, Captain Shah was permitted to carry out this training on regularly scheduled flights. MH370 was scheduled to fly for 5 hours and 34 minutes. The captain had placed an order for enough fuel to last the plane for 7 hours and 31 minutes, plus 2 hours of reserve fuel. The flight took off normally from Kuala Lumpur and climbed to its intended cruising altitude of FL 350 or flight level 350, which is equivalent to about 35,000 feet above sea level. Airplanes follow predetermined routes by passing through a collection of fixed locations called waypoints, which offer a roughly straight path to their destination. MH370 moved forward in the direction of the Agari waypoint, the first en route electronic waypoint. Air traffic control authorized MH370 to switch to the communication radio frequency of the following control sector, where the pilot would be expected to report about 37 minutes after takeoff, as the aircraft was approaching the Agari waypoint. The aircraft was in a transition zone near the Agari waypoint. It would enter the Ho Chi Minh Air Traffic Control Sector's airspace after leaving that controlled by the Kuala Lumpur ATC sector. The aircraft responded, "Goodnight Malaysia 370 to Kuala Lumpur ATC." This was the last radio communication with MH370. 1 minute and 43 seconds later, after the final radio transmission, a significant anomaly happened on board MH370. The plane vanished from air traffic screens in Kuala Lumpur, Bangkok, and Ho Chi Minh. The airplane's electronic tracking signal vanished entirely. A radio device known as a transponder uses the airplane to transmit the electronic signal. In response to a radar interrogation from a ground-based facility, the transponder sends a signal. ATC could hardly see MH370 after the transponder signal vanished from the radar screens. After the transponder signal was lost at that time, there was no additional MH370 ATC communication. Voice communication with the aircraft had stopped, and MH370 was no longer being controlled or watched over by ATC. The disappearance of flight MH370 initially went unnoticed by the ATC controllers. The reason for this was the precise moment the transponder signal vanished from the radar screens, which occurred as the flight was transitioning from one control sector to the next. Investigators discovered that it took some time for the receiving sector controller to realize that the expected aircraft, MH370, had not checked in or appeared on his radar screen. 4 hours later, MH370 was officially declared missing. 8 years later, it's still one of the biggest unsolved mysteries in the aviation industry. The morning after it disappeared, the search mission began for flight MH370. Malaysia was the center of attention, especially during the issues that were encountered at the beginning of the investigation. There were concerns during the search when particular details of the flight were brought up. One main serious problem was how the passenger manifest was handled carelessly by Malaysia Airlines. Knowing who was on the plane was critical at a time when information was limited. From the beginning, officials jumbled facts and raised doubts about what was going on. 2 people on the plane were using stolen passports, and this was discovered after authorities began notifying governments all over the world about the nationals on board. What was the reason as to why the passports were not reported stolen? Malaysia never checked passports against Interpol's database of lost and stolen passports. On March 15, Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak announced that Flight 370 had remained in contact with the satellite communication network for several hours after it vanished vanished, and that the aircraft was last detected by military radar over the Andaman Sea. According to the analysis of these communications, the last contact with the aircraft occurred while it was traveling along one of two corridors, one stretching northwest to Central Asia and one stretching southwest into the southern Indian Ocean. Australia took charge of the aircraft search on March 17 and closely monitored the line of inquiry in the Indian Ocean. The governments of Malaysia and Australia came to an agreement on March 31, 2014 that Australia would be in charge of the search effort in the southern Indian Ocean. MH370's underwater search was conducted in a remote area of the southern Indian Ocean, about 2,000 kilometers from Perth, so it took up to 6 days for search vessels to get there. The search was divided into two phases. Phase 1, an underwater search known as a bathymetric survey, produced a detailed map of the topography of the seafloor in the search area. This was used to guide Phase 2, the underwater seafloor search. The underwater search used side scan and multi-beam sonar equipment mounted on towed and autonomous underwater vehicles to collect high-resolution sonar images of the seafloor in an attempt to identify the location of MH370. The Phase 2 data is now available via the Geoscience Australia website and the National Computational Infrastructure. 278,000 square kilometers of bathymetric data were gathered during the search for MH370, and a total of 710,000 square kilometers of data were gathered during the search's transit from the port to the search area. This is one of the biggest and most expensive marine surveys that has ever been carried out. Australian investigators stated in June 2014 that radar data indicated Flight 370 may have been operating on autopilot for several hours prior to running out of fuel and crashing into the southern Indian Ocean. The authorities didn't publicly speculate as to who or why the plane was put on autopilot after it veered off course, but they did say it was possible the crew and passengers had lost consciousness due to hypoxia or oxygen deprivation prior to the crash. The authorities offered no explanation as to what might have contributed to the lack of oxygen. One major theory arises out of all the mysteries: pilot suicide. Other authorities speculated that Flight 370's pilot, Sahari Ahmad Shah, may have intentionally flown the plane into the Indian Ocean as a suicide mission, but there was no conclusive evidence to support their claims. Only the fact that Shah was a very political person, and many speculated that the plane had been hijacked by Shah in protest. He, like many others, was outraged by how the United Malays National Organisation regime had maintained power in Malaysia for 57 years through a variety of undemocratic means. Its most notorious case was the 1998 use of alleged manufactured sodomy and corruption charges to imprison the politician Anwar Ibrahim. On March 7, 2014 at 3 p.m. on the afternoon of that fateful flight, Shah was seen in the National Capital's courthouse in Kuala Lumpur, where a decision was made that would keep Anwar in prison for another 6 years. Shah was a close friend and relative of Anwar's. 8 hours later, Shah was on Flight 370 bound for Beijing. Did Shah want to exact revenge on a regime he despised by having the plane vanish? Australian investigators who oversaw the 4-year joint search for the flight rejected that theory and defended their belief that an accident caused the plane to disappear entirely. In January 2017, Malaysia, Australia, and the People's Republic of China announced a joint suspension of the search until more credible evidence identifying the specific location of the aircraft became available. In January 2018, the Malaysian government accepted the offer of the American firm Ocean Infinity to continue the search for MH370. The contract was on a no-win, no-fee basis. If they are successful in finding the missing plane, they could get up to $70 million, but if they fail, they'll get no fee at all. Its ship, the Seabed Constructor, started the search on January 22, but just 10 days later, it suddenly turned off its automatic identification system. It reappeared outside the search area 3 days later while en route to the Australian port of Fremantle for a scheduled refueling stop. Neither the Malaysian government nor Ocean Infinity has provided an explanation for the outage or the route taken by the ship during those 3 days. Conspiracy theories circulated online over the course of the 3-day data blackout. The most popular theory centers on a known shipwreck close to where Seabed Constructor disappeared, which is believed to be the 1911 sinking of the Peruvian-built transport ship NV Inca. Theories say that Seabed Constructor has taken a detour to recover sunken treasure from the ship. Family members of those on board missing MH370 MH370 have expressed concern over the lack of transparency surrounding the new search effort, as the disappearance of the plane appeared to reignite rumours that Malaysian authorities were covering up what happened. After the hunt by Ocean Infinity on May 29, 2018, the search for MH370 came to an end. Despite all the efforts and the massive 200 million Australian dollars spent on the search after 4 years, nothing was found. The only physical remnants recovered from the plane were a piece of the plane's wing and a flaperon. The outboard flap on the right wing was found to have washed ashore on Pemba Island, east of Tanzania in 2016, far from the area where experts initially thought it vanished. Today, almost 30 parts related to the jetliner have been discovered. Some are confirmed, others are highly likely, and others still unidentifiable. On September 8, 2022, Richard Godfrey, a retired physicist and aerospace engineer, published a paper that he thinks answers some of the mysteries of MH370. After using weak signal propagation reporter analysis to track the plane's final path and analyze radio frequency disturbances it caused, Richard believes he has some evidence as to what really happened. Godfrey observed strange patterns in the flight of the aircraft, such as 360-degree turns over the ocean. 3 hours into the flight, the plane also entered an unusual 20-minute holding pattern, which is when the pilot keeps the plane in a specific pattern within designated airspace, frequently waiting for additional clearance to continue. He claims that these peculiar details support the theory that pilot Zahari Ahmad Shah intentionally diverted the plane from its course. Until the end of the MH370 flight, there was an active pilot who may have been disoriented due to hypoxia. Although he made an important remark that without the aircraft and recovery of the flight data recorder and other evidence from the wreckage, there is still mystery surrounding flight MH370. The Australian Transport Safety Bureau, or ATSB, described Godfrey's work as credible in a statement they released, but it hasn't opened a new investigation. According to the ATSB, they don't acknowledge that Godfrey's work recommends a search zone for MH370. In a previous paper released in December last year, Richard calculated the location of MH370's final resting place in the southern Indian Ocean, some 2,000 kilometers west of Perth in Western Australia. If his analysis is accurate, the new search area might only be 18,000 square kilometers, a much smaller area than the 120,000 square kilometers searched in 2017, which was the largest search ever conducted at the time. In order to confirm the plane's location with satellite data and drift modeling, he used data that allegedly showed that the plane tripped off a series of radio waves in empty airspace as it passed. Godfrey said that there's still certain information being withheld, particularly by the Malaysian government. When asked if they would pursue further negotiation with China and Australia to launch a new search mission for MH370's wreckage, the Malaysian government said they might if more credible evidence were found. Ocean Infinity, the same company involved in the MH370 search in 2018, announced that they will be conducting a new search in 2023 or 2024. With the same approach they used before, no win, no fee, Ocean Infinity will be using the most modern cutting-edge ships in the entire world for this upcoming search. Thank you for hanging out and watching today. My name is James and this is the restricted section. If you enjoy stories like this one, please do all that fun stuff and like the video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our future uploads. If there's any topics you'd like to see in future videos, please let me know in the comment section down below. Thanks again, and I'll see you on the next one.